Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I'm so excited to have you with us because today we are unpacking a really fascinating 2,000-year-old historical detective story. We're going to examine a classic case of textual contradiction that's been hiding right in plain sight within some of the most famous literature in human history. Whether you're a massive history buff, a literature nerd, or just someone who loves a good ancient mystery, you're going to find the mechanics of this absolutely mind-blowing. So let's jump right into the evidence.
So, who exactly was Jesus's grandfather? Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a super simple, straightforward historical question, right? You'd think that for a figure of such monumental cultural importance, the answer would be crystal clear. But as we start digging into the ancient texts, this innocent little question suddenly opens up this wild labyrinth of contradictions, competing narratives, and some really fascinating historical workarounds. To actually answer it, we have to look closely at our primary sources.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the core paradox, solving a massive puzzle. To figure out why this mystery exists in the first place, we have to understand a real brain twister for the authors of these texts: cognitive dissonance. If you've ever read through these accounts and felt a little confused, you are absolutely not alone. In fact, you're feeling exactly what the text intentionally sets up. On one hand, ancient tradition held a super strict requirement. The Messiah absolutely had to be a physical, blood descendant of King David. But, on the other hand, there was this emerging tradition of the virgin birth. So the reader is basically forced to accept two totally conflicting ideas at the exact same time. Joseph isn't the physical father, but Joseph's physical family tree is the ultimate proof of legitimacy. It's wild. This paradox meant the authors had to present genealogical proof through Joseph. But when we flip open the canonical texts to see who Joseph's dad actually was, we hit a massive brick wall. We get two completely incompatible sets of evidence. Over on side A, the author of Matthew claims Joseph's father was a guy named Jacob and gives us a descending royal bloodline. But then over on side B, the author of Luke claims Joseph's father was a man named Heli and presents an ascending, more local bloodline. Two texts, two completely different grandfathers. So how did this happen? Let's interrogate our first witness in Section 2. Matthew's royal line, a descending pedigree. Let's take a closer look at how Matthew's family tree was built. Matthew's genealogy is what historians call a descending line. It starts way back in history with Abraham and cascades downward through the generations all the way down to Joseph. And like we just saw, it explicitly names Jacob as Joseph's father. But pay attention to the path it takes. This is a highly official dynastic bloodline. It traces straight through King David and his famously powerful son, King Solomon. Matthew is essentially handing us a royal pedigree. He wants to prove absolute, undeniable, legal royalty by following the official dynasty of the Judean kings. Now here is where it gets really interesting. Look at this number, 14. Matthew doesn't just randomly list names. He organizes this massive span of history into three very distinct blocks, and every single block has exactly 14 generations. It's perfectly neat. Almost too neat, wouldn't you say? And in the ancient world, that kind of mathematical perfection, yeah, it's rarely an accident. This brings us to a super fascinating ancient concept called gematria, which is basically where letters also double as numbers. In Hebrew, the consonants for the name David are D, V, D. If you add up the numerical value of those specific letters, 4 plus 6 plus 4, you get exactly 14. How cool is that? It's a literal historical Easter egg. Matthew deliberately manipulated the historical record. He even left out a few known historical figures just so his theological math would calculate perfectly to scream the name David over and over again. Okay, so Matthew gives us a highly stylized, mathematically precise royal decree. But what about our second witness? Let's pivot to Section 3, Luke's prophetic line, an ascending origin. Luke's approach just completely flips the script. Instead of going downward, his timeline flows backward. It ascends from Jesus through Joseph, whose father is named here as Heli, and goes all the way back past Abraham, past Adam, straight up to God. But check out the route he chooses. While Matthew went through the famous King Solomon, Luke actively avoids Solomon altogether. He traces the line through a totally different son of David named Nathan. By doing this, Luke neatly sidesteps the whole line of famously corrupt Judean kings, presenting what scholars view as a more prophetic, priestly, or localized bloodline. To really give you a clear mental map of this, think about how the family tree actually functions. The two accounts actually agree for a really long stretch. From Abraham all the way down to King David, they list the exact same names. But the precise moment they hit King David, the tree violently splits. After David, the lists of names diverge completely, never to meet again, until they both suddenly arrive at Joseph. As you can imagine, people notice this contradiction pretty much immediately. Let's look at Section 4, Ancient Solutions, Harmonizing the Texts. One of the earliest and honestly most elaborate theories came from a 3rd century thinker named Julius Africanus. He used an ancient Jewish custom called levirate marriage to find a legal loophole. Let's walk through his logic, because it's a trip. Step 1. He proposed that Heli died without having any children. Step 2. Heli's half-brother, Jacob, steps in and marries Heli's widow, which was the custom back then to continue a family line. Step 3. Joseph is born. So, Africanus argued, Joseph was the biological son of Jacob, satisfying Matthew, but the legal son of Heli, satisfying Luke. I mean, you got to admit, it's a brilliantly complex legal argument. But do these ancient alibis actually hold up today? Well, let's break them down. That incredibly clever levirate marriage theory, it's largely debunked by modern scholars. It's just viewed as way too overly complex. And more importantly, there is absolutely zero evidence for it in the original texts. Now, another really popular theory you might have heard is that Matthew gives Joseph's line while Luke is actually giving Mary's line. But textual criticism debunks this one too. Luke explicitly names Joseph, not Mary. Plus, ancient Jewish genealogies were strictly patriarchal. They were simply never traced through the maternal line. So if the ancient cover-ups and harmonizations don't hold water, where does that leave us today? Let's check out Section 5, Modern Historiography, the final verdict. This whole mystery brilliantly illustrates the consensus of modern scholarship. Historians today don't look at these genealogies as like literal birth certificates or DNA tests. Instead, they see two completely independent historical traditions. You've got two different communities of early believers, and they're utilizing two completely different sets of genealogical material. But here's the kicker. Despite all their contradictory details, they shared the exact same overarching goal. They both wanted to firmly establish and prove Jesus' Davidic descent using the literary tools they had at the time. They aren't recording biology, you guys. They're making a theological argument. Which leaves us with this final, really profound question to ponder. Why does the family tree matter more than biology? Well, in the ancient world, truth wasn't always about literal genetic exactness. It was about meaning. It was about legacy and fulfilling a grand narrative. These genealogies show us just how deeply ancient communities cared about connecting their present moment to the sweeping prophecies of the past, even if it meant carefully shaping the historical record to make those puzzle pieces fit. It completely changes how we read these ancient texts, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep asking those great historical questions.